Welcome back to G Fun Facts Online. Today, we are going to take a journey that starts in the distant past and ends at the cutting edge of modern biotechnology. We are heading to the mist-shrouded mountains of Guilin, in the Guangxi province of southern China. If you were to walk through these mountains centuries ago, you might have stumbled upon a vine that the locals whispered about with a sense of reverence. This wasn't just food, it was medicine. For generations, the local monks, known as the Luo Han, cultivated a peculiar round fruit. Now, here is the interesting part. They didn't prize this fruit because it was sweet, even though it is incredibly sweet. They prized it for its qi, or life force. They brewed it into elixirs to soothe the lungs, calm the throat, and restore balance to the body's internal heat. They called it Luo Han Guo, the fruit of the arhats. Fast forward to the modern world, and you probably know this botanical curiosity by a different name, monk fruit. If you walk into a grocery store today, you will see monk fruit pigeonholed as a keto-friendly sweetener, just another white powder in the war against calories. It is marketed as a guilt-free indulgence, a way to cheat your diet without the consequences. But today, on this episode, we are going to strip away that marketing gloss. To view monk fruit merely as a sweetener is to ignore a complex biochemical symphony that has played out in traditional Chinese medicine for nearly a millennium. Science is finally catching up to the monks, and what we are finding is that beyond that intense sweetness lies a powerhouse of bioactive chemistry. We are talking about triterpene glycosides, flavonoids, and polysaccharides that interact with your DNA, your gut microbiome, and your metabolic machinery. This isn't just a story about replacing sugar. It is a story about a fruit that might just rewrite the narrative of metabolic disease. So let's settle in and deconstruct the biomachinery of Serratia grosvenorii. To understand the chemistry, we have to start with the botany. Serratia grosvenorii is a herbaceous perennial vine. It is actually a member of the Cucurbitaceae family, which makes it a distant cousin to the cucumber, the melon, and the squash. But unlike a cucumber that you can grow in your backyard with minimal effort, the monk fruit vine is incredibly temperamental. It is a diva of the plant world. It demands a specific microclimate found only in those misty, subtropical mountains of Guangxi. It needs the diffuse light of the mountain fog, a specific mineral composition in the rocky slopes, and a very delicate balance of humidity. This geographical isolation is part of why it remained a local secret for so long. The first written record we have comes from 13th century monks who used it to treat what they called heat patterns. In the paradigm of traditional Chinese medicine, things like chronic coughs, sore throats, and constipation are manifestations of inflammation and dehydration. The monks didn't know the molecular biology, but they were effectively treating inflammation with one of nature's most potent anti-inflammatory agents. Historically, the fresh fruit was rarely used because it rots very quickly. It has a high sugar content and volatile compounds that cause it to ferment. So the drying process became part of its identity. That traditional slow baking of the fruit didn't just preserve it, it likely altered its chemical profile, concentrating the active compounds and creating those caramel-like flavor notes. Today, growing this fruit is a feat of agricultural science. The plant is dioecious, meaning you have separate male and female plants. In the wild, they rely on specific insects for pollination, but in commercial farming, humans often have to intervene to ensure a yield. And getting the sweetness out? That is another challenge. You can't just squeeze it like an orange. Obtaining that bioactive sweetness requires a water extraction process that separates the active compounds from the fructose and glucose that are in the fruit's flesh. This is a crucial distinction. The fruit contains sugar, but the extract, the white powder you buy, contains mogrosides. And that brings us to the star of our show, the mogroside molecule. This is where the magic happens. Mogrosides are chemically classified as cucurbitane-type triterpene glycosides. Let's visualize that. Imagine a rigid core skeleton that hates water. This is the triterpene backbone, and it looks a lot like the structure of steroids or cholesterol. Attached to this backbone are various glucose units, or sugar molecules. This structure creates a biological paradox. You have glucose units, so it looks like sugar, but the body doesn't recognize the molecule as a carbohydrate to be burned for energy. The bond between the glucose and that backbone is resistant to digestion in your upper GI tract. So why is it sweet? Why is it 250 to 300 times sweeter than sugar? It comes down to the lock and key mechanism of our taste buds. We have a receptor on our tongue called the T1R2, T1R3 heterodimer. A sucrose molecule fits into this receptor like a standard key. It turns, and your brain says sweet. But mogroside V, the most abundant of these compounds, acts like a master key. Its large structure binds to that receptor with incredible affinity. It hangs on. It stimulates the receptor far more intensely than a simple sugar molecule ever could. That is why you only need a microscopic amount to get the same sensation as a spoonful of sugar. But the mogroside family is diverse. You have mogroside V, which is the primary sweetener. You have mogroside IV and cyamenicide I, which are also sweet but less abundant. And you have mogroside 2 and 3, which can be bitter, a high-quality extract. isolates mogroside V to avoid that bitter aftertaste. Now, let's move beyond the taste. Let's talk about what this molecule does when it enters your system. We need to talk about oxidative stress. Think of oxidative stress as the rust of the biological machine. It happens when you have too many free radicals, which are unstable molecules, and not enough antioxidants to neutralize them. This cellular rust is a primary driver of aging, cancer, and heart disease. Sugar causes oxidative stress. Monk fruit fights it. Studies have shown that mogrosides act as direct scavengers of reactive oxygen species. Their chemical structure allows them to donate electrons to these unstable free radicals without becoming unstable themselves. In laboratory tests, monk fruit extracts have shown a significant capacity to neutralize superoxide anions and hydroxyl radicals. These are some of the most damaging things that can happen inside your body. But it goes deeper. One of the worst consequences of oxidative stress is DNA damage. When free radicals attack the nucleus of a cell, you get mutations. Research indicates that mogroside V can form a protective shield around cellular DNA. In studies where DNA was exposed to oxidizing agents like hydrogen peroxide, cells treated with mogrosides showed significantly less breakage and mutation. It is also a shield for the pancreas. The pancreas is the organ responsible for producing insulin, but its beta cells are notoriously weak when it comes to antioxidant defense. They burn out easily. Mogrosides have been shown to upregulate the body's own internal antioxidant enzymes, specifically superoxide, SOD mutase, and glutathione peroxidase, within pancreatic tissues. It is, essentially, upgrading the pancreas' own defense system. Next, we have to look at inflammation. Inflammation is the body's fire alarm. It is good for fighting infection, but when the alarm gets stuck in the on position, you get chronic disease. Sugar is pro-inflammatory. It spikes insulin and triggers cytokine release. Monk fruit is anti-inflammatory. The master switch for inflammation in your body is a protein complex called NF-kappa-B. When this switch is flipped, your cells start pumping out inflammatory cytokines. Recent pharmacological studies suggest that mogrosides act as inhibitors of this NF-kappa-B pathway. They block the signal. In mouse models, applying mogrosides reduce swelling and tissue damage as effectively as some pharmaceutical drugs. They also tame the macrophage. Macrophages are the Pac-Man cells of your immune system. They eat debris, but they can also cause collateral damage. Mogrosides modulate their activity, preventing them from releasing excessive amounts of pain-causing compounds. This suggests a massive potential for managing conditions like arthritis. Now, let's get to the topic that affects millions of people: metabolism, diabetes, and obesity. The application of monk fruit here goes way deeper than just being 0 calories. There is evidence to suggest that mogrosides are insulinomimetic. That means they mimic the action of insulin. In studies on type 2 diabetic mice, mogroside V was able to stimulate the uptake of glucose into cells, even when there wasn't enough insulin present. This is a critical finding because in type 2 diabetes, the cells stop listening to insulin. If mogrosides can open the side door to let glucose in, that is a therapeutic breakthrough. It also affects the liver. The liver is your fuel tank. When you are fasting, it makes new glucose in a process called gluconeogenesis. In diabetics, this system malfunctions, and the liver pumps out sugar even when you don't need it. Mogrosides appear to inhibit the enzymes responsible for this overproduction, helping to lower fasting blood sugar. And then, there is the fat-burning switch, an enzyme called AMPK. Exercise activates AMPK. Metformin, the diabetes drug, activates AMPK. Research indicates that mogrosides can also activate AMPK. This tells the body to stop storing fat and start burning energy. In animal studies, high-fat diets supplemented with monk fruit resulted in lower body weight gain and reduced abdominal fat. It shifts the metabolism toward fat oxidation. But what happens in the gut? For years, we thought non-nutritive sweeteners just passed through us. We were wrong. Nothing passes through the gut without meeting the microbiome. This is where monk fruit distinguishes itself from things like sucralose or aspartame. Your body can't break the bond in the mogroside molecule, but your gut bacteria can. When mogroside V reaches the colon, beneficial bacteria from the Bacteroidetes family secrete enzymes that cut those glucose bonds. They eat the sugar, and in the process they convert mogroside V into a metabolite called mogrol. This is a prebiotic effect. You are feeding the good guys. Consumption of mogrosides has been linked to an increase in beneficial strains like Bacteroides and Lactobacillus, and a decrease in pathogenic strains like Clostridium. As these bacteria ferment the sugar units, they produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. Butyrate is a miracle molecule. It fuels the colon lining, reduces leaky gut, and even crosses the blood-brain barrier to improve brain health. And that leftover metabolite, mogrol, it is absorbed into the bloodstream. Preliminary research suggests mogrol might be neuroprotective, potentially preventing memory impairment. Now we have to touch on a serious subject: The cancer connection. I want to be very clear here. Monk fruit is not a cure for cancer, but its bioactive components are being studied for chemoprevention. Cancer cells are defined by uncontrolled division. In test tube studies on colorectal, throat, and pancreatic cancer cells, mogrosides have been shown to inhibit growth. They appear to arrest the cell cycle, stopping the division. They also trigger apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. They turn the suicide gene back on in cancer cells. There is even evidence that they can inhibit angiogenesis, preventing tumors from growing new blood vessels. In one study, a specific mogroside lowered the levels of a protein that helps cancer spread to other tissues. So how does monk fruit stack up against the competition? Compare it to stevia. Stevia is natural, but it often has a metallic aftertaste because its compounds trigger bitter receptors. Mogrosides are cleaner. They don't bind as aggressively to those bitter receptors. Plus, the prebiotic fermentation of monk fruit's massive glucose chains offers a gut health advantage stevia might not match. Compare it to erythritol. Erythritol is a sugar alcohol. It is often mixed with monk fruit to add bulk. It is generally safe, but in high doses, it can cause digestive distress. Monk fruit, on its own, causes zero distress because you use such a tiny amount. And compare it to sugar. Sugar spikes insulin, causes oxidative stress, feeds bad bacteria, and causes inflammation. Monk fruit does the exact opposite on all 4 counts. Before we wrap up, let's look at how it is made. Modern processing is an evolution of the old boiling method. The fruit is crushed, and the pulp is steeped in hot water. This liquid is then passed through a resin column. This is the cool chemical step. The mogrosides stick to the resin, while the sugars and off flavors pass right through. Then, they wash the mogrosides off the resin with food-grade alcohol or water and spray dry it. This ensures that the final product is almost 100% pure mogrosides with no sugar. Monk fruit has achieved GRAS status, generally recognized as safe, worldwide. Since it isn't absorbed in the upper GI tract, systemic toxicity is virtually non-existent. So what is the future? We are entering the era of functional sweetening. We are moving past just removing sugar. Imagine a sports drink that sweetens your electrolyte mix, but also uses mogrosides to reduce exercise-induced inflammation in your muscles. Imagine a diabetic food that doesn't just avoid spiking blood sugar, but actively protects the pancreas. As research continues, we might see monk fruit derivatives used not just as food additives, but as therapeutic agents. To conclude, calling Serratia grosvenorii a sweetener is a reductionist error. It is a biological marvel. It is a plant that evolved a chemical defense system that happens to tickle our sweet receptors, while simultaneously scavenging the free radicals that rust our cells. From the misty peaks of Guilin to the microbiology labs of the 21st century, the story of monk fruit is a testament to the complexity of nature. It offers a solution to the modern metabolic crisis that is elegant in its simplicity. Replace the poison with the antidote. It turns out the ancient monks were right all along. It wasn't just about the taste, it was about the life force within. Thank you for listening to G Fun Facts Online. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to follow us for more scientific explorations.